Good morning to you, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here in Santa Monica, California, United States of America. March 16, 2021. A series of talks, sharings on behalf of, for full support of, the breathtakingly courageous women and men, boys and girls, nuns and monks, all peoples, all freedom-loving people in Myanmar, Burma. At this very moment, continuing the struggle for decency over dictatorship, for freedom over fear, for the right to breathe without terror and to have a future of peace and prosperity, the right to dream. You freedom-loving people of Myanmar, you in the civil disobedience movement, you nuns and monks, girls and boys, women and men, those at this point detained, disposed, tortured, abused and violated and traumatized, and others rising high in the sky of their own moral courage to confront MASAC, Ming Online, State Administration Council, the acronym for Burma's now labeled Taliban, Khmer Rouge. They are a terrorist organization, and the good people of Burma are rising up every minute of every day to confront both the injustice and to elevate the status of freedom. Thank you, people of Burma. I've never felt so activated, although I've had many moments of activation over the years of my life. I am in a renewed sense of meaning and purpose based upon, on the outside, affiliating myself with the heart of your people, with your struggle. I feel empowered, emboldened to support in the best way that I can, along with many millions of other people around the world who feel the same as I do, no doubt. And leaders will come on board. Burma has become the lightning rod for freedom and democracy in the world. Do not doubt that fact, even though there's a great impotence at the moment with leaders in the free world in the United Nations to act, act with authority rather than just simply words and press releases and stern statements. You are alive in your revolution, and we are there with you. Today, a spontaneous talk that just came to me over the last couple of minutes walking here in my home in Santa Monica. An analogy of my great love of Myanmar that I learned the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. And I'd like to make the analogy both extemporaneously and allow me just to move through it in my own humble way. The Four Noble Truths of overcoming dictatorship. I think once there is a stencil, a template that's more and more evolved in both meaning and application, that we as a whole in the world can see more clearly the mindset of dictatorship. Obviously, when Ming Online goes, and he will go, as Tan Shui will go, as Ne Win went, it's a mindset. And I think everyone knows that. But although MASAC disappears, goes to prison, is jailed, goes into exile, who knows what, his days are numbered. The mindset of dictatorship, I think we must psychologically and emotionally unpack and understand to help once and for all, although MASAC is removed, that dictatorship as a state of consciousness, an ecosystem of beliefs and attitudes and emotions that, when fused with grasping and attachment, congeal into a terrorist organization as we see today in Myanmar. I think most everyone who's a Buddhist will understand the Four Noble Truths, the truth of dukkha or suffering, the cause of it, the release from it, and the path beyond it. The truth of dictatorship, the dukkha, the suffering of dictatorship, the first noble truth of overcoming dictatorship, the dukkha of being born under dictatorship, the dukkha of growing old under dictatorship, the inherent suffering of being oppressed and suffocated by the mindset of dictatorship is inherently oppressive. What are the attributes, if you will, of dictatorship? It's been said many times, even by Aung San Suu Kyi, that dictatorship is an idea, a state of mind. It could be called a form of apartheid or apart from something. Dictatorship is apart from freedom, from rule of law, from justice, from decency, from dignity, from the right to dream. And I think it's important for us all to understand that dictatorship isn't a mind alone in a man's brain. It's a state of consciousness. It essentially is stating to the people of the world, to the people of Myanmar, dictatorship is more important than your right to be free. Its function is to violently oppress through propaganda, intimidation, violence, and all other forms of coercion and propaganda. It basically says your ability, your right to dream creatively, to live in freedom, to play music of your choice, to draw pictures of whatever it is that turns your heart into the star or a galaxy of your hope. Hope is not something I want to allow you to have. I want you as a dictatorship to belong to the cult of obedience to my dark authority. It's inherently violent and abusive and intimidating. And if one isn't aware of the psychology of dictatorship, one becomes colluded. One becomes complicit. One belongs to the cult of the Third Reich. And many people wanted to have the baby of Hitler. Many people stood firm with Hitler all throughout his tenure of the greatest sadist in modern times. There are many people who adore, oddly, strangely, Ming Online and the Thamada and the military and this terrorist group. They are under a delusion. And that's a very important part for me in this first noble truth of overcoming dictatorship, is to understand the inherent dukkha. I like to sing, I like to walk, I like to dance, I like to touch, I like to make love, I like to play music, I like to buy the food of my choice, I like to feel safe in my home and in my body, I like my family to feel safe. All of what I just said, a dictator wants to take that away from us. We have every right in the world to stand up in the liberty of our own moral authority and have a taste of freedom and to confront the injustice of what Ma Sack is doing today. It's inherently dukkha or suffering to live under the dark maniacism of dictatorship. I've written down 10 points, and I'm sure there are many more, that I think if we embed very carefully and begin to study them, education is the best means of revolution. Aung San Suu Kyi has said this, and many other people who are freedom fighters that are born without using the gun to overthrow the maniacism of the dictator. They use the power of human consciousness, the power of the human heart, the power of conscience and dignity. And they want to kill dignity. They want to kill conscience. They want to kill God. They want to kill the Dhamma. But you can't kill that because it's everywhere. It's the oxygen. You can't kill oxygen. You can only pretend to kill it. 10 points of dictatorship. First and foremost, they're a cult. 2, they have the characteristic to punish, and to punish harshly on the one hand, and equally they reward lavishly to those who collude, like the cronies in business and construction, in gems and oil, in China, in arms, in Russia. Anyone who wants to help the dictator, they reward lavishly with bonuses, with mansions, with money, with privilege and power. And the epoxy of that type of colluded behavior with evil is that greed becomes the operating system of dictatorship. And we see it all over the world. Right now, we're seeing it very acutely in Burma because Burma no longer wants to live under a dictatorship. They don't want to live under a military drafted constitution that we saw in 2008. That's over. And they don't want to live under a military organization that is obedient to evil. Those three dimensions now have been exposed in Myanmar, and the people of the revolution have seen that very, very clearly. I would venture to say this isn't an obstacle to democracy. I would like to say the silver lining here is that the people of Burma and the people of the world who are supporting Burma see very clearly right now, 2020, that anything to do with the Thamada, the military, Masak, Tanchwe, the history of totalitarian dictatorship in Myanmar is over. It is done once and for all. And I think Masak knows that because look at the violence that he's inflicting on the people. And no matter what he does to terrorize the people, look at the bravery. It arises all over the country. The more he tries to oppress, the more people rise up. He's terrified and he doesn't understand it. And all he's got is a rifle and a gun and the blind obedience. If you do not shoot and kill, you will be shot and killed. Welcome to dictatorship. Point 3, the power is in the hand of one or a few people. Point 4, a dictator obliterates the media. It's happened in Myanmar. Why would a dictator want to obliterate freedom of press, freedom of conscience, freedom of association? Why is the truth so threatening to dictatorship? Because they know that they're evil, and the media, Myanmar Now, Irrawaddy, all the various media organizations and radio and television, the bravery of the reporters in Burma, Nobel Peace Laureates for journalism in Burma alone, along with the people. But they want to obliterate news and fact. They don't want you to know. And the people in Burma that are rising up right now, they want the world to know. They're taking videos, they're taking photographs, they're sending texts, and we're informed based upon conscious journalism. And why are they shutting the media down in there? What are they afraid of? They're afraid of the shame of killing their own people because they're terrified, and all they've got is the bang bang. Without the bang bang, he would be a whimpering, crying rat in a jail cell somewhere in Somalia or in Bolivia, and there he would be, Ming Online. Even his wife wouldn't touch him. He'd be a cowering, sick, broken, dead rat. And all he's got right now is a uniform to wrap the rat body mind of dictatorship around that rancid state of consciousness that's inflicting horror upon the people. But the people in the world know. Oddly, Masak has given a gift to the world and to the people. Before, we had 11 straight years after Daw Sue's release and all the other people that were elected fairly. But there was always that nagging 2008 military Tanchwe driven constitution that was just literally a pain in the ass within democracy. No matter what went down, they didn't want to amend it. They always had majority rule within the parliament with that ridiculous 25% of military cyborgs sitting in a parliament of liberated free thinkers that had been elected by the people, and they had no election. It was like, what are we playing this kind of totalitarian Truman Show with? This is completely bogus. This is a 1984 throwaway. But now, it's been absolutely exposed for what it is. A complete manipulation and a sham. There will be no democracy in Burma with the 2008 Constitution. It is done. Whereas before, it wasn't done. And that's a huge step forward within Myanmar's elevation of universal human rights, unity among the ethnicities. Look at the unity that's come out of this in a very short period of time. In 5 brutal weeks, the ethnicities are beginning to unify under a federation of freedom fighters for the country of Myanmar to isolate the terrorist group in Naypyidaw. And all of a sudden, we're beginning to see the 2008 Constitution being abolished. It's done. And we're beginning to see the unity among the ethnic groups, which is incredible. And the people are uniting like we've never seen before. Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, all the other freedom fighters from the day, U Tin U, U Win Tain, U Win Tin, U A Mong, so many others of hundreds and thousands that have died, that have been disposed, that have written their memoirs, that are older, but now the youth is there. All of that has come to fruition based upon today's courage of the youth and the people rising up around them, that we refuse to participate in the first noble truth of dictatorship. We are done with living under the dukkha of the delusion of dictatorship as right. Point 5. State-sponsored murder. Imprisonment and torture is a characteristic of dictatorship, whether it's in Bolivia or Somalia, whether it was in Germany, whether it was in Italy under Mussolini, and whether it's under Masak in Myanmar. State-sponsored murder, imprisonment, and torture, and coercion, and intimidation as a means of control. Thank you very much for letting me born into your household. It sucks. I want nothing to do with it. And the people of Burma are done. Done, done, done. That's why he's trying to play the unrelenting card. He's done. Point 6. The right to private property, land, home, and ownership is being obliterated. Even bank accounts now are being taken over by the terrorist group in Naypyidaw. Land is being taken. It's been taken for decades. Your home, your private property, your car, your motorbike, your bicycle, your shop is no longer yours under dictatorship. He is revealing his true nature. Nothing belongs to you under the dukkha of dictatorship, the first noble truth of overcoming this maniacal thing called totalitarianism, military rule, military dictatorship. You don't have the right to own. Every rupiah, every jot, every dollar, every little bit of gold, every cryptocurrency, every car, everything that you have, even the clothes on your children's body, don't belong to you under dictatorship. That is a mindset. Although Masak is going to go very quickly, we want to remove any vestige of that. What you own is my consciousness. Again, I'm pointing here to not a Buddhist, a trans-Buddhist. I mean, it's one of the things I love about the Four Noble Truths, is that they're not about Buddhism. They're about a cognitive, physical, and mental ecosystem, or an architecture, or a discernible set of laws and principles called a set of patterns that govern consciousness and its interaction with rupa, or form, with materiality, with the concepts of freedom and the concepts of dictatorship. And I think that Dhamma, the Dhamma of freedom, and the Dhamma, or the Adhamma, if you will, of dictatorship, right now we need to create a cognitive stencil and to evolve these talks like today, evolve these behaviors, to share them throughout like a life-transforming meme that elevates the status of an individual through the power of education rather than through the power of the gun, through intimidation and torture. Pause. I know this is a lot to take in, and I wish I could be more prepared, but I don't, because I like to speak extemporaneously and I want to speak every day, so it comes just as I think it. But remember that we're force multipliers. These talks, our sharings, they belong to the world, and may they be shared in a multiplicity of ways, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, in email. May they be translated into the various dialects within Myanmar and the languages of your country. May they be translated into Burmese. May they go into the inboxes of our leaders, our ambassadors, our presidents and prime ministers. May they be infiltrated into the Thamada, the military terrorist group in Burma. Spread them far and wide. Please share, share, share. Otherwise, just don't listen. We have to be activists today and belong to the revolution of the people risking their lives every minute of every day in Myanmar to confront the dukkha of dictatorship. So please share. Point 7 is a dictator accumulates a massive amount of wealth. That's a characteristic. And when you look, many people have hypothesized that the diabolical need of the dictator and the mindset of those around him, in this case, and her, there are wives and there are other women in control, that it is the incredible obsession, if you will, the extreme loba, to use a Pali word, greed, incredible, tenacious addiction to the need for money, for identifying with lavish things around me, ornaments, gems, Mercedes-Benz, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Lamborghinis, famous paintings, fine clothing, jets, houses in the mountains, all those things. That obsession with wealth and status goes to the hands of just a few people. And when you look at Burma, and you look at China, especially under the genocidal, nuclear-armed dictator Xi Jinping, but look throughout history with Hitler, look throughout history with Italy's Mussolini, look at the various dictators, Stalin, they have obsession with wealth and privilege and power and money, and they'll do anything under the sun to protect their ability to use a poor analogy, to mainline, to inject. It's like crack cocaine or a methamphetamine. Wealth, power, and status and privilege is despicable. And they'll do anything, kill, torture, even their friends and family, in some cases their own children and wives, to maintain their wealth, privilege, and power. It is nothing other than the unbridled, unmindful relationship to the state of mind of loba and moha that fuses into this obsession with power. And there's never enough. You can never do enough crack cocaine of power. The more power, the more I want it. More and more and more and more and more. And that's all. They're like hungry ghosts, like petas. And 8, they employ a security apparatus around them to, like the MI in Myanmar, it's like a secret service of men and women who spy on everything. Edward Snowden exposed that within our own military apparatus here in America. But that underground, digital, data-driven, omnipotent, big brother, big sister eye that's watching and documenting, looking, recording everything that you do and think so that they can have dictatorial eyes on every quadrant of every city throughout the country. They want to know who are the people who want freedom. Let me pause here and come back. The first noble truth of the dukkha of dictatorship, the suffering of dictatorship, what they want to do is they want to obliterate your desire to dream, to create, to think freely, to go to school, to learn, to study, to achieve the dream of your choice within your vocation, to put your hands into your heart, into the earth to grow. If you want to manufacture or to create, that you want to build, you want to contribute to society, the dictatorship doesn't want you to dream. And the children and the boys and the teenagers of Myanmar and the world, you have had a taste of what it means to think out of the box. Ming Online did not recognize your love of freedom. We have never seen in world history, in my time, a revolution so engaged with the radiance of courage, the love of freedom, the creativity of dance and theater and poetry and music and puppetry and costumes. Look at the streets of Myanmar in the early days of the Spring Uprising. Look at the incredible radiance of creativity that you brought to the world stage in bringing your love of freedom to the people. And Mossack, the terrorist group, what he wanted to do with that expression of freedom and beauty and poetry and dance and intimacy and rock music and rap and hip-hop and punk and heavy metal and death metal and classical and cello and intimacy and silence and meditation and poetry and the multiplicity of faiths and the belief in education as a right to every child, he said, no. Do as I say, not as I do. All those things that you want, only for my friends and my family and my wife and my children. You are like animals. You're like quay. You're dog. You're vermin. You're rat. You are exposable. Bang, 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 bang. They don't even shoot dogs in Burma the way they shoot boys and girls right now. It is a sickness. The dukkha of democracy is a sickness that wants to kill the human spirit, wants to kill nature. Let us be clear about that mindset. The mindset of freedom, coexistence, peace, unity. It may be an ideal, but I want to go about speaking about our differences with heart, with courage, with peace, with mediation, with restraint. I want to understand what you mean by your position. The power of love and dialogue to iron out our differences rather than the blunt force of the gun and the butt and the tank and the missile and the drones and the torture, the unremitting sense of you disobey, I will kill and torture you. That's how stupid and maniacal and narrow the mindset of dictatorship. And Dasu knew it. And she, among all the thousands and tens and thousands and millions of freedom-loving people in Myanmar, you know the beauty of freedom. Point 9, state the obvious. Dictators, every now and again, allow what they call a free and fair democratic election. Remember back in 1990? Remember the ones in between? Remember 2020? And a dictator, what do they normally do? After the so-called free and fair election, and everyone's been elected, and we've seen everyone campaigning around the country, we've seen who the people want as their representatives. A dictator, what do? It was just a psychological ploy to bring and to extract from the good people who trusted the elevation of democracy in transition from one-party authority into multi-party democracy. They trusted that. And yet again, history has proven that it was a psychological war tactic by Tan Shui and Ming Online to do nothing other than to extract from society who were the leaders that the people wanted to represent them in the People's Parliament in Naypyidaw. And where are they today? 6 weeks after the election, they're either dead and not just ordinarily assassinated. These two Muslim representatives of the NLD that were taken from their homes in Rangoon and mercilessly tortured with toxic chemicals poured into their faces and their mouths. It's beyond inhuman. It's sending a message. If you want to speak and stand up for freedom, you'll get toxic acid in your face. We'll kill you. Is that a free and fair democratic election? No. A characteristic of dictatorship is that they fake these so-called elections. That's why at this point, there is no promise of an election to come. I'm sorry, Mossack. Your days are over. Your game is over. Your story is over. Your narrative is dead. You're a dinosaur. You're already fossilized. You don't realize that you're dead already and you're going through the machinations like a chicken with his head cut off, and you're still running around ordering your men to shoot. But if the men knew that you're already without a head like a chicken, you're already dead. Get that. Mossack, Ming Online, Tan Shui, although you think, you eat, you defecate, you order, you move, you relate, your head is no longer on your body. You are dead, metaphorically. And your doctrine of dictatorship, which is nothing more than a euphemism for unbridled dark dukkha or suffering, is also dead. You're coexisting now within the vast mass population of the people of Burma who will not retreat from your evil. Get it? Your head no longer belongs to your body. You're dead. And the last part is exactly what I just said. The 10th characteristic of dictatorship is that it ends. And it's ending. My experience, my humble opinion from the outside here, is that Mossack, Ming Online, MAH, State Administration Council, SAC, Mossack, the latest terrorist organization on the planet. Again, it's the equivalent of the Taliban in Afghanistan, ISIS, Khmer Rouge, Boko Haram. Mossack is an acronym for terrorism and a terrorist organization hiding behind the military uniforms of the former Thamada, which it's no longer in operation in Burma. It can be restored, but not with Mossack and Tan Shui and the other leaders there. But it comes to an end. And let me come to a conclusion today and continue this talk tomorrow and flesh it out even more. You know, we're talking about the Four Noble Truths of overcoming dictatorship. The dukkha inherently of dictatorship, being born into it, living under it, growing old under it, the diabolical denigration of the right to dream. It's an idea, the cause of dictatorship. You know, like the cause of suffering, greed, an attachment to an idea or concepts, the attachment to self, What does that mean? A characteristic of dictatorship is the obsession with self, with mana, with pride, with ego. It's the opposite of anatta. It's the opposite of jnana. It's the opposite of panya, or wisdom. The obsession with violence is a characteristic or the cause of the dukkha of dictatorship. Attachment to an idea, attachment to privilege, attachment to power, attachment to pride, and attachment to violence. Those are what hold dictatorship together. The third noble truth of overcoming dictatorship is that there's a freedom from dictatorship, both in the moment, within the week, within the month. Civil disobedience is a freedom from dictatorship. Non-participation in dictatorship isn't just confronting Masak. It's stopping all association and relationship with the apparatus of the mindset of dictatorship. They're imprisoning doctors and nurses and civil servants in Burma, teachers. People who give birth to their very children, they're torturing. They want to cut the womb out of these women nurses and doctors. They're evil manifested. But here, the third noble truth of overcoming the dukkha of dictatorship, it's momentary. Trust in that practice. Anyone who's meditated knows the power of mindfulness to, on the one hand, confront accumulated forces of akusala, greed, anger, and delusion, lobha, dosa, moha. That's the operating glue that holds dictatorship together. It's just simply a set of mind states. Anyone who understands Dhamma or meditation, who's ever meditated, who's ever been a yogi, will understand it's all within one's own mind, playing out on the tragic field of society and civilization. A man in control and out of control with his greed, anger, and delusion rains tyranny and hell down upon the people, like we're seeing in Burma. But for the freedom fighters right now, remember, in the very process of the struggle, there's freedom. I would like to encourage everyone, as I was encouraged in meditation, although there is the nibbana, the nirvana, the ultimate freedom beyond dictatorship, a thriving democracy, a thriving civilization where creativity is elevated to the status of the stars. But there's a momentary freedom from dictatorship. And I think it's very important to remember not to get too carried away with the goal alone, not to lose sight of that on the horizon of our hope, but at the same time to be really pragmatic yogis, if you will, Dhamma savants, people who understand the power and the conviction in the fourth noble truth of overcoming dictatorship. Dana, Sila, Bhavana, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, any Buddhist would know that. Ethical intelligence, the power of mind training or of bhavana, and the power of wisdom or of panya. Ethical courage, mental courage, and the radiance of freedom itself. Those three dimensions. If we could understand these two things, I feel that from my understanding of Dhamma and fighting dictatorship with consciousness rather than simply the fist or the gun, which may very well be coming, how do you consciously bring Dhamma to armed resistance in self-defense of tyranny? Let's talk about it as the weeks go on. But meanwhile, it's still a non-violent state of consciousness embodied by what Dasu and the other great people who've given their lives over for this freedom fight have advocated. We're using the power of human consciousness, the power of ethical, moral strength. What does that mean? On the one hand, confronting in the moment greed, anger, and delusion. Overcoming our own fear, but not acting fearlessly, as Dasu encouraged everyone when I met her. Alan, we operate with fear. We don't wait to be fearless. We learn to coexist and quiver with the fear. Quiver with freedom. Associate with the majority of the state of mind that we operate from, and in that way we live freely as we evolve freedom from fear. And I think that's a very important thing to bring Dhamma to the democracy struggle to confront the dukkha and the evil of dictatorship. And the last point I'd like to make today is that nothing that I can see that's being done in Burma with the freedom fighters, with the civil disobedience movement, with more and more people refusing to participate in the apparatus of evil. They're stopping work. They're stopping selling food and petroleum. They're stopping manufacturing. They're just ending. It's over. It's done, like in South Africa. Tourism is done. Meditators won't be coming. It's over. No one is going to work. No one's going to put their good hands and heart into the banks, the oil, the gas, the manufacturing, the garments, the rubies, the trees, the lumber, the cars, the roads, the constructions, the dams. No one's going to participate. It's done. And soon even the uniforms are going to become ragged. No one's going to sew them. No one's going to correct them. The world is not going to support you with maintenance for the military and the planes and the jet fuel, the intelligence for repair. No one. Everyone's going to embargo you, Masak. Everyone's going to stop participating in the evil of your great darkness. Dictatorship in Burma is dead like a chicken with its head cut off. It's over. And more people are beginning to see in Burma. You don't have to fight with the gun. Just stop participating with your hands. Stop participating with your mind. Stop work. Stop the machinations of this evil. And the last point, again, is the elevation of freedom. It's a tragedy to see that dictatorship is so obsessed with their love of denigration, with their love of demonization, with their love of violence, that they don't understand the radiance of freedom that their children want to play under the sun. They want to make music. They want to dance. I don't know about you, but keeping the littlest expressions of freedom even within the darkness of this tyranny alive. The way we make tea, the way you eat, the way you touch each other's body, the way you dress, the way you move in a monastery, the way you watch your breath, the way you give dana, the way you wipe the blood off a friend who's been shot, the way you pray, the way you meditate, the way you bring mindfulness into your day-to-day life. Remember the little beauty, the radiant of states of mind of freedom. Freedom isn't an absolute that we only achieve when we reach Nibbana or Arhantship or Buddhahood, but it's gradually increasing the radiance of this light little by little by little, and let Burma become a revolution of the little. Every day, let people see you manifesting bravely what it means to live without the fear of persecution, to stand up tall in your body. I remember in the monastery how my teachers, Mahasi Sayadaw and Sayadaw Usujata, Uzawana, Sayadaw Upandita, mind you, it's a very different terrain, but we lived based upon the goodwill of the lay people in Burma. We walked the villages to find our food. They brought food to the monasteries. They provided us with our robes, our medicines, our sandals, our razors, our hope. Our life was interdependent on the people. And we had an obligation to keep the high practice of mindful intelligence as the radiance of our lives, to keep our sila, our moral integrity, to keep our power of the Dhamma in practice. The littlest of things, I remember Sayadaw U Pandita often encouraging us, eat with gratitude, eat with dignity, embody the freedom that you seek through sitting meditation right now. That is the gift of Myanmar. It's not Buddhist. Dasu brought it to the revolution. U Tin brought it to the revolution. U Chi Mung brought it to the revolution. U Win Tain brought it to the revolution. U Win Tin brought it to the revolution. Ming Ko Nine brought it to the revolution. Koko Ji, Mom Mom Myat, Ma Thida, Nila Thain, hundreds and thousands of other freedom fighters brought freedom to the revolution. Bring freedom in every way imaginable to the revolution of the spirit in Myanmar. Don't just see it, please, if I can invite you to see it as a confrontation on the streets. Illuminate the sky of this dictatorship of darkness with the radiance of freedom in every way, every place, in every posture, in every circumstance. And may I close with a story of my dear friend U Win Tain, right now suffering yet again after 20 years in prison, being hauled away and incarcerated in insane prison in a wheelchair. Back in 1989, as a military who left the terrorist group, became a close ally of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. I met him in 95 and 96. He was captured by the terrorist group at the time, the military, put on his knees with a hood and interrogated for 28 days. And he told me over the course of many days the story, but in a short minute. They kept screaming at him, "Why are you in the democracy movement?" Beating, as we're seeing many people being beaten in Burma. And he couldn't believe they were actually sincerely asking him, like, you're a former military man. He's on his knees with a hood, with his arms tied behind his back, being beaten and screamed and starved. And like, why do you want freedom? Why didn't you stay in the Thamada? Why didn't you stay in the military? And he couldn't believe that they were sincere. And eventually, after 28 days of really not saying anything at all, and they're screaming at him, "Why are you in the democracy movement?" And he told me, he said, he told them, "For your sake." And he really saw for the first time, really got it into his heart, that they absolutely are indoctrinated with the evil idea that dictatorship is in fact the Dhamma, the truth. They're that deluded to think, they're that indoctrinated. And he began to see, as he's explained to me over the decades, and as many people in Burma know, that dictatorship isn't confined to one mind. It's a mindset. It's the absence of critical thinking. As Dasu, it's the absence of the right to question authority. It's the beauty of moral integrity that champions dialogue over denigration and violence. It's the opposite of terror. It's the radiance of uniqueness. They were indoctrinated, and they were only doing what they were told to do without question. They never learned what it meant to bring in the most important components of the Dhamma to their own lives, which is mindful intelligence. As my mom would often say, "Alan, mindfulness is not enough. You must know that at this point. You can be looking through the scope at someone who's a target that you designate as an enemy, and you can mindfully focus and get concentrated, and you think you're killing the enemy. But unless you're really intelligent and you question the authority that that person in that scope may not be the enemy, it may be your own indoctrination to believe them as the enemy, only then will your mindfulness be intelligent enough to be discerning enough to put the gun down and go out and ask, is that person really the enemy? And right now, Mossack has got a lot of people obedient to putting good people behind and in front of that scope, and no one's questioning the authority of that evil indoctrination. Freedom fighters must fight indoctrination. Every day, every way, keep freedom alive. From my heart to yours, thank you for allowing me to be involved in your struggle. I'll see you tomorrow at 9:30 here from California.